Hi folks, I'm Neal Barton and I have a podcast, and you know what? I've always told by my mom and my dad, whatever you do with friends, don't talk about politics or religion, and today we're doing just that. And here we go. Now it's time for the old podcast once again. Everybody has the right to my opinion and also these gentlemen's opinion. We have Dustin Slayton. You are the pastor at Green Acres South, right?
Yes, sir.
And we have the Reverend Chris Dudley. You're both reverends, I should say that, who is the pastor or senior pastor at the Long Lake Baptist Church, right? Thank you very much for being here.
Yes, sir.
It's almost Easter. You excited about that? This is your Super Bowl, right?
That's right.
You already got your sermon
Excited.
planned?
Well, the good thing about being a campus pastor is I don't have to preach. I leave that to David Dykes.
That's pretty good. What about you, Mr. Dudley?
I've got one coming.
Got one in the pipe. So let me ask you this. And so I've had this discussion with friends of mine who are clergy. We just got through Christmas a while back. We're coming up on Easter, and this is sort of a big question. I think it's very important. How come as Christians, in full transparency here, I am a Christian person. I attend Green Acres Baptist Church in Tyler. Why don't we make a bigger deal out of Easter than we do Christmas? Because basically, if you are a Christian person and you are plugged in and charged with the Great Commission, you're supposed to win souls, so to speak. And so how come we don't make a bigger deal out of Easter than we do Christmas? Am I wrong? Go ahead.
Well, I think a big part of it is that you just can't fluff up the resurrection or the crucifixion and the resurrection. Mm-hmm. You can make Noah's Ark look cute enough to put on the nursery wall. Mm-hmm. You can make Christmas fun and just talk about all the little gifts and talk about the Magi and all that kind of stuff, but when it comes right down to it, you can't romanticize the cross.
But should we give more of credence to it? Because there is a Christmas season, and we sing Christmas songs and we have Christmas plays and this and that and whatever. And this is not an indictment of you. Right. It's just Christendom in general. It seems like even when I was a kid, there was more to do with Easter, and now it's pretty much, well, here it is, and it's gone, and now let's move on, and there's summer camp. But Chris, you didn't get a chance to answer.
Yeah, I would also add, I think commercialization has a lot to do with it. You look at Christmas and you have so many different things. I mean, you have Santa, you have a tree, you have all these things, and you have a lot of presents. So of course the world's going to say, "Oh, well, that's more fun."
And special music.
And special music, and
silver bells.
Exactly, and all the movies, and so that all comes with it. So the world makes it a bigger deal. So since they make it a bigger deal, it's kind of like we kind of fall in line with it, and we don't really say anything about Easter, because Easter is the most important holiday that we celebrate overall.
Right.
But I think commercialization has a lot to do with it. To like what he was saying, you can't really commercialize Easter very well except for an Easter bunny. That's about it. Because you can't commercialize Jesus. I mean, even in secular world, they can commercialize Jesus a little bit. It's a baby, but not on a cross dying and then raising, because that would put too much emphasis on that he's God. And people don't want to do that.
Well, should we though? Should
we?
We
should.
Should we?
Yeah,
what do you think about that?
Yeah, we as believers definitely should. And
how could you change that?
How could I change that? Or we as Christians can change that.
And once again, let me just say this once again. When I ask questions, this is not a question at your church or whatever. We're just talking as gentlemen. I'm not calling anybody's church out or whatever. So
right. Well, I think it comes right down to the whole fact that most Christians don't evangelize at all. That's what Jesus left us with. Go and make disciples of all people.
It was the Great Commission.
The Great Commission. And so that centers around the cross, and it's just something that's kind of painful to talk about. A lot of people, Christians or non-Christians, can get behind a baby being born and the excitement of Christmas, but the resurrection and the cross is very polarizing, because if you believe it, you have to base your life on that if you believe that it's true. And so it's a polarizing topic.
No, he's absolutely right. I mean, it is the most important thing, and a lot of things that, if you notice, what are the two most busiest church days of the year? Christmas and Easter. Because you have a lot of quote-unquote Christians that will show up for those days, but then they don't make a big deal about anything else. So they're kind of couch potato Christians, I guess you could say. They don't want to be involved, but yet they are involved enough to say that they believe something, but yet they won't take it out at church. And I hope I'm not taking it too far down the wrong way.
Go ahead.
But the problem, excuse me, a lot of the problem we have is a lot of people think church is church. And what I mean by that is Church is where you go to learn, to grow, to fellowship with one another, but then you go out into the world and work. That's what you're supposed to do. But a lot of people think, oh, just because I come to church, we're good. And so they don't make a big deal. Well, I'm here on Easter. I got my Easter dress for my wife and daughter got their Easter dresses, and I'm wearing my suit and tie, and I look great, so I'm done for the year. You know, they just don't put enough emphasis on it because they may not even care, to be honest with you.
Right. Oh, yeah. Years ago, I was a greeter at a church in another state, I won't name it or whatever, and every Sunday I had that door or whatever, and I showed up one Easter Sunday, and some guys there I've never seen before in my life wearing a suit, hugging everybody's neck, handing out programs. I'm like, what's he doing at my door? And they said he does that every Easter. And he was some big banker in town who showed up, and he passed out pamphlets every Easter Sunday or whatever. And so what can you do to kind of fix that? What do you think? You guys ever talked about that behind closed doors and pastors meetings and whatever, getting more people plugged in?
We talk about it from the standpoint of just motivating the church to be more missional, living more missionally. I think that if we could take Easter as one example, but really all the mission of the church, we've got to awaken our church, within our church, a desire to see people come to faith. And Easter fits right into the middle of that. A recent study shows that the majority of millennial Christians, actually born-again active Christians, believe that it is wrong to try to proselytize somebody, is what they say. That it's wrong to try to convince somebody that their faith is wrong and our faith is correct.
But how do you fight that, though? Because pretty much if you read the Bible, and I have, you are commissioned. There is the Great Commission. You are supposed to go. And that's one reason why people think that Christians are so obnoxious. And again, I can say this because I'm in the family, that you're not supposed to, don't hit me with that Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday or whatever. But if you read the Bible, it says you got to do it. That's part of the gig, right?
Right. And I think that's part of the issue is because a lot of people think it's the pastor's job or the missionary's job or whoever the ministers are, it's their job to do all the work, and they're just supposed to show up and learn and go home and have a good message and feel good about themselves.
It's kind of fun to get to see everybody.
Yeah, but that's not it. And like you were saying, how do we fix it? Well, the way we fix it is the congregations have to get out and work. And I'm not saying that they don't.
When you say work, what do you mean by work?
Like preach the word, like tell people about Jesus. And I'm not talking about my congregation, and so if nobody write me.
Again, this is us talking.
I just want to make sure.
I just want it's not about the church.
Right,
Church
but in general, when you come to hear a message, you go home, you check the message, you see if the man was speaking right, and if he is, then you're like, okay, now how do I apply this to my life? And you go apply it. And a lot of people don't do that. They can't tell you what the pastor talked about 20 minutes after they left.
What do you think about basically some of our social norms kind of being relaxed? When you were a kid, you had to go to you had to go to Easter Sunday with a suit and tie and whatever, and the girls had the Easter bonnets and the white gloves or whatever, and now it's completely relaxed. And a lot of churches, in fact, one of the songs of invitation is "Come as You Are," and boy, people now are coming as they are, and I still have to shave, at least I go to for service or whatever. What do you guys think about the relaxation of Christianity, at least the services?
I mean, I think there's a sense where we need to dress to a place where we honor what we're doing. I'm not, as a pastor, obviously, I'm not going to get up on stage in my context in Bermuda shorts and a Hawaii shirt or something like that. That would not fit well here in East Texas. Even so, we think we need to dress in a way that is comfortably contextually, but still, I personally think on the upper end of that line. So, we as Christians need to honor the Lord by bringing our best, and that doesn't mean that you've got to wear a suit. Your best may not be that, and you don't have to wear that every week. But we just need to honor the Lord with our appearances and how we dress.
Well, no one enjoys going to church more than I do. I'm completely guilty of that, especially in the summertime. I mean, people just, my late mother rode me like a rented mule about it. If she came up here and we went to church, if I wasn't dressed up like my father did or whatever, it was almost like she was disappointed.
Well, I think there's a good point to it, and what I mean by that is, it's good to dress up, it's okay to dress up, but it's also okay to go somewhat kind of casual. I look at it as, if you're going to go to work, wear jeans, a polo shirt, I'm cool with that. I don't wear a suit. I don't find it in the New Testament anywhere where they wore a tie. I'm just saying. As the old saying goes.
There's Peter in this tie.
Yeah, but I'm with what he's saying. You want to look presentable, but at the same time, it's okay to not wear a suit, and it's okay to not be stuffy at church. It's okay to
It's
not
okay
be
to have a good
miserable.
time.
I mean, David danced. David praised the Lord. A lot of people will go sit in a suit and just sit there and just sweat and be miserable. Why? I mean, go somewhere you can be relaxed. Not like you said. Don't be that. It does bother me when there's the cool pastors that have to look like the teenagers.
I call them the shirt tail pastors because they got the long shirt tail and the whole thing. And again, let me just say, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the new trend or whatever. Which brings me to this: the Seekers movement. Okay, I'm almost 60 years old. And all my life, it's been the secrets of secrets, and finally, they have the secrets showing up. But how has that changed the whole context of church or whatever? Because it used to be a more formal thing, suit and tie and whatever, and now to get people to sample to come in or whatever, how has that changed things?
Yeah, it definitely has changed things. You know, that kind of started with, in large part, with Rick Warren at Saddleback and Bill Hybels at Willow Creek, and.
Well, I'm older than you. I'm telling you, it started a long time ago, back in the 60s.
You're talking about the Jesus movement.
The seeds were out there. In the 70s, then all of a sudden you had this contemporary Christian music, and all of a sudden people showed up in the pulpit to sing or whatever, and they didn't look like the normal blue suit, red tie, black shoes, whatever. But slowly but surely it has changed, good or bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I think that's fine. I think it's good because it has created a context or an atmosphere where non-Christians, or we call them, non-believers, unbelievers, not yet Christians,
samplers,
however you want to call them, seekers. Yeah, they have a place where they feel comfortable coming to investigate.
Yeah.
Whereas if we were all sitting around in our suits and ties, they might just from the very get-go, you guys don't get me. I'm not even going to give this a shot.
You are right, because years ago I brought a friend of mine who was not a believer to church or whatever, and I said, you got to bring your suit and tie, whatever. And he came. And afterwards, he said, man, I just felt like I was a fish out of water. And so I can see it from both sides of the aisle. Chris, what do you have?
I think it's a good thing to invite people to come to church. I mean, you want people there. You want them to hear the message. And if they visit one time, I mean, I don't know how many times we have people come and, hey, we're looking for a church. Well, to me, that says I have one message to talk to you because you may not be back, and I hope this plants a seed.
That's pressure.
Right. So I don't care. Well, I give it to the Lord. I don't care what they look like. They could come in a tank top, wind shorts, and some flip-flops. You can sit down and we will embrace that you're there. We want you to be there. Because ultimately, I mean, you just want people to come in because it's about getting people to know Jesus. That's the whole point. So I'm all for it. I don't care what color they are. I don't care what they believe. Come to church, listen to the message. We invite everybody. So that's a good thing. I don't think it should matter if you don't come dressed to impress,
Sure.
Now, I do think if they get into the church and they join, they would change a little bit, and they would, you would start wearing a little bit, yeah. But no, I don't have a problem if anybody walks in wanting to just hear the message.
Right.
You guys, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, I think that's the challenge, and I know that Hybels figured that out, and there in his church is that you can't go so seeker sensitive that you don't disciple them when they get there.
That is a very good point.
They were creating a generation of shallow Christians, and they realized that. They just had to change their model a little bit.
Yeah, because here's what I hear from so many people is that it's good to have the seekers. It's good to have people come and sample. We're always happy about that. But also don't forget the people who basically built this place, tithe, which is always kind of rough for preachers to talk about, tithe all the time and keep the church going.
Well, the way we do it, or the way it's done at our church, I haven't changed anything, and I don't plan on trying to change anything of the way we do things. But what we preach a lot and teach a lot is when someone walks in, and my church was, when we first got there, before we even became pastor, I became pastor, they invited us in. They're so loving, and that's great for a church to be that way. That's the first step. Doesn't matter what you look like, you got to be loving. Because I've been to a church with loving people, but they didn't show it.
Right.
So when somebody walks in, they feel like they're outsiders. You bring them in, you say hi, every person in that church will meet you, and they will say hello to you, and they will say, we're glad you're here. That's the first step. And then you don't forget about them. We don't teach anything we don't try to change anything to say, oh, we're just going to bring people in. No, we're going to keep it the way we're doing it. They can come in. We invite them in. If they show up, they're there.
Yeah.
And then we don't change anything. You don't have to change things for people to come in and grow. It hurts the church when you focus on just one group.
Yeah.
And you say, we're just going to do this, like what you were saying, and then you push everybody else out. You just bring it all in and just make it all work. It's not as complicated as people think it is.
Yeah, well, I know a friend of mine basically went through a very rough time, and they were at basically what was a seeker's church, and went through a very rough time, and really needed some people to kind of reach out, if nothing else, just say, love you, it's okay, praying for you, that sort of thing, and it never happened. And so that person changed churches, and so they also got me to thinking about how many of these churches that are made up of seekers or new or people who were turned off at one time or whatever, they didn't get the little thumbs up, or at least, I don't think anybody really just wants constant attention, but a little bit of, love you, man, we're thinking about you, whatever. How do you fix that? Because I see that was a big problem, and that person was very hurt by that.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, one thing that just made me think of, Ed Stetzer talks about in one of his books. He was at Lifeway Research.
Who is it again?
Ed Stetzer.
Okay.
He's at Lifeway Research, and I think now he's up at Wheaton College. But he talked about 2 different levels of conversion, is what he called it, which could get complicated, but basically conversion to community, then conversion to faith. And bringing seekers into the church where they, and getting them into a place where they feel welcome and engaged, giving them some ownership. Maybe they're handing out the bulletins, stuff like that as people coming in. And as they grow in the community, they begin to discover what it means to have faith, and then they will eventually be converted to faith. And so, that first conversion obviously is not salvation. It's just engaging in the community. And so that's kind of what you're talking about. It gives some of that ownership and that connection. If you're converted to the community, people begin to notice when you're not there, and they can reach out to you and give you that affection and care that you need.
And one thing that I don't know if I've coined this phrase or not, but I call it the bag 'em and tag 'em. That's kind of.
I believe that's hunting, Chris.
I know, but that's kind of what we do. What I've seen in the
bag
churches.
Bag 'em and tag 'em.
Here's what I mean by
I didn't see that in the Amplified Bible.
It's not. Jesus didn't say that. What I mean by that is we bring in people, or we have people come down to the altar call, and we lead them in a prayer, and then you're saved, and they can't explain to you what that means, and then we let them walk off, and there is no discipleship like what you were talking about earlier. We have to disciple. Disciple is not a sprint; it's a marathon. You have to show some love and some affection there. You have to be able to, like what you said, check on people, talk to people. Sometimes just saying, "Hey, I'm here if you need me," is more than enough. It's just showing that you actually care and live out what Christ told us to live out and do, and that's what we got to do. And we don't do a lot of that. And so the church members, what I think falls on a lot of them is when someone new comes in, talk to them, get to know them. So show them that you're glad they're there, and then don't just walk off. Meet them again and say, "Hey, nice to meet you. Let's go out to lunch." Just start that conversation.
It's really amazing to me because I've been a Christian person all my life, just about. And I used to be, and I have no problem saying this, I used to be basically a coward when I saw people. I'm talking about, I became a Christian when I was a kid back in 1968. You guys weren't even born back then. But when you see somebody in school lose a parent, lose a brother or sister, I'm talking about death, something bad happened, dad runs off, that sort of thing. Man, I wanted to help, but I didn't know what to say. So when I saw this person, I made a right turn. I ran away. And I did that for most, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I did this for most of my adulthood. I really prayed for that person, wanted to be with them, that sort of thing, but did not know. And David Dykes, basically at the Green Acres main campus, said this, and it sort of set me free, so to speak, because I'd gone through both my mother and father dying, and when you go through that, you're just sort of like in this fog. And when people, it's okay when you're getting married, you can have the youth pastor, your friend who's a pastor marry you, that's fun. But when people are dying, people want the preacher. And so many times David Dykes gets called to ICU or the funeral home or whatever. And he said something I thought was very profound. And it completely changed things for me because I've been through it. When you're going through that, and it's finally done, thank God it's finally done and you kind of heal up, no one remembers what you said. People just remember that you were there.
Absolutely.
And that's the truth. Because it's just a big fog you're going through. But when it's finally done and you can look back at it and you're so thankful for the people who were there. I can't remember what anybody said, relatives, preachers, or whatever, but by gosh, at least they were there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the part of community that we have to have. You know, I've got 2 church members in the hospital today, and whenever I was up there earlier today, you know, there was almost 10 of our other church members with those different groups, and you know, that's just the part of community that we need. And I was actually talking with another lady last night who goes to another church, and she was talking about how in her moment of need, her church wasn't there, and how that really impacted her. And so, but you're right, people don't realize that they don't have to necessarily say the right thing.
I know.
And they're afraid, you know, do I talk about the situation or do I talk about something else? You know, just be there and talk about how good the donuts are.
Sure,
you know,
but the fact that you were there.
that makes a
Well,
huge.
like what we've talked about before, 80% of it's just showing up.
Yeah.
I mean, you just show up. Sometimes they just want somebody, like you said, you don't have to say anything because you may not know what to say, but just being there is enough. Because
you feel the people. I mean,
Right.
whenever you are in that fog, and it is a fog, and the doctors are telling you things you don't want to hear, you're having to make decisions, you realize this is it, or we're close to whatever. Man, you do gain strength just by people who show up.
Right.
Because you're in this horrible pit of despair, and you're seeing people come in from the outside world who are not going through the suffering you're going through, and somehow it just wakes you up. And again, it's nice to have a word of prayer, it's nice to get the Bible, whatever you can, but it's that great old New York theologian Woody Allen said one time, 90% of life is just showing up. And with this, 90% of the life, I think, is also showing up as well.
Well, sometimes people don't want to hear scripture right then.
No.
And you, the hardest thing when you go to someone who's having a struggle, and I've tried not to say this, is for me to walk up to you and say, "How are you doing? Do you need anything? How's it going?" Well, of course it's going bad.
Yeah.
I mean, you're at the hospital, you're at the funeral home.
Right.
So just saying, "Hey, I'm here. Let me know if you need anything, if you need to talk," and then just stay there. That will go so much. Like he was saying, talk about the donuts. That's exactly right. Just talk about something. I went to there was a couple that was, the lady was going through something, and I went there and we just talked for like an hour about everything but what they were going through.
I know,
pretty much.
because you
We talked a little
want
bit,
to get
but-
out of it.
Right, we talked a little bit about it, but I was just talking, and it was fine, and it was just what they needed, you know? I mean, just say, hey, somebody's there, and that's all it is. We just want to know that somebody's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how much proximity is actually listed or talked about in the scriptures. And you know, we've been talking through the Passion narrative this at our church lately, and you know, tonight we'll be talking about Friday. And so, you know, in Friday, there are a lot of people that follow Jesus. You know, obviously the disciples abandoned him, but right there at the cross, there's people. You know, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Joseph, John the apostle, are mentioned just because of their proximity. And Rufus and Alexander were the sons of Simon the Cyrene, who later became probably parts of the Roman church. They're listed just because of their proximity. They had nothing to do with the actual journey to Golgotha themselves, Rufus and Alexander, but they're there. They're mentioned because of their proximity. And so that's a huge thing.
And to add this, just for everybody out there, if you do try to help people and you can't get to them, don't text them, call them.
Call them.
Text them last minute. If you can't get a hold of them, shoot. If you've called, left messages, don't just send a text first. I know nowadays you want to, but that is, no, don't do that unless you just can't get in touch with them and tell them you're coming, tell them something, because sometimes they just need to know, but try to call them, try to get contact with them.
So sending the pray hands emoji is not good.
No, that's not. No.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
wouldn't do that.
really making the rounds
Don't
or
send
whatever.
a cross, don't send any of that.
How many times, especially in the evangelical 60s and 70s, have I seen a preacher go to the podium, which nowadays they don't use a podium anymore, but they say, you know, I had my sermon all ready to go and stacked and packed and whatever, but now I'm going to preach something else from my heart or whatever. So, Chris, you mentioned before, you don't really have to preach on Easter Sunday, but do you have the guts to walk in there Sunday morning after you are stacked and packed and have it all set to go and realize and feel the Spirit move and realize what I have ready to go is not ready to go, I should do something else? Would you have the guts to do that?
Yeah, it happened to me once. Usually it happens on a Saturday. I'll be honest. If any time it's happened on a Saturday, but one Sunday I went in, and for whatever reason I was like, I can't talk about this today. I want to talk about this, and the Lord led me to something else, and I was scared to death, but it worked. And I was like, okay, that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it for show. I literally was like, I can't talk about what I'm going to talk about, so I need to change it because you're telling me to, so I did it. I hadn't even studied it. I just opened it. Here we go.
There you go.
And we did it.
And you
But
changed it.
I've gotten sermons at 6 in the morning, on Sunday. I woke up one morning, didn't have anything. I couldn't figure out what to preach on. I woke up one morning out of the blue. I couldn't go back to sleep. I was like, okay. So I just got up, made some coffee, opened up the book. The first thing I opened up to, and this has never happened since. I don't know if it's ever going to happen again, but that's what I taught on that day, and it worked. I was like, all right, you got it.
Yeah.
So it happens, just not very much.
Right.
Has it happened to you?
It has. You know, we have a live feed at the South Campus, and that's all relying on
live feed
technology.
for the main Green Acres
from the time.
mothership.
Yeah, that's right. And there's been a few times where the feed is down, and so I have to get ready for that, and that's worked.
Tap dance a
there's
little bit.
There's been one time. There was one time where we didn't realize the feed wasn't working until they hit play, and they just didn't have any sound. And so that was one of those where they said, "Hey, you're on." So,
We're in television. We understand.
Yeah, y'all understand.
It's a little bittiest thing.
Yeah. But that was funny because I got up on this podium and asked, I was like, am I preaching? They said, yeah. So I got down to get my Bible. And I still claim to this day that my wife said, hey, preach on Ruth, because I'd just been studying in Ruth. Yeah. And she swears that she never said that. And to me, that was just the Holy Spirit saying, do it. And so that's what I preached on. And anyway, if God puts you in that situation, He'll give you the words to say. That's for sure. And
I've experienced it more in conversation, I think, than sermons. Because usually I don't want to give away how I do this. I'm not going to give all away. My church may be like, wait a minute. I don't study really hard all week. I pray about what I need to talk about. God gives me something, then I start thinking about it. And if I don't know what it is, I'll look it up. But
if it reaches critical mass, and
then when the time's right, I'll open up the scriptures to read the scriptures. It all comes together, and then bam, there it goes. But sometimes, when talking to people or whatever, that's when I've really felt the Spirit, because I either won't know what to say, something will come, or I'm thinking this is going to be great, and then God says, shut up, and don't say anything, and then you just wait, and then you're like, oh, that's why I needed to be quiet. Yeah, so that's when I really felt it. But yeah, it just when the Spirit talks, you just listen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Dustin?
That I prepare a little bit differently. I'm more of like a study, and ride along the way.
Everyone does it differently.
Yeah, everybody's a little bit differently, but
I do study though.
Yeah.
I'm
not saying,
let's just get that in there.
I'm just making sure.
I'm not saying you don't, but
I know you're not.
My problem is always trying to get everything that I've studied into 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, even with what I do in television, TV will ruin you for church. Because you show up and it's like, come on, let's go. And I mean, you're in just in case you didn't know, folks, Chris is our production manager at KTK, and so he understands the whole thing of, and thank goodness nowadays no one goes out and reads the bulletin anymore, because we got it, and let's go as fast and quickly as you can, and you can tell somebody more than they want to know about the subject. And a person's average listening space is like 18 minutes, and let's giddy up, let's go.
Mm-hmm. See, that kind of bothers me a little bit, and not.
How so?
I know what you're talking about for 30 minutes. For church people out there, don't make your pastor go 30 minutes and then be like, you got to stop.
Yeah.
Just let the sermon go. And I don't mean there is sometimes when it may be too long, but if the pastor has something God is laying on his heart to talk about, just talk about it. What really bothers me is, like the other day, somebody from my church went to another church to do something, and they said, yeah, he talked so long that the pastor almost didn't get time to do his sermon. I'm like, well, why not? Just do the sermon. Who cares what time you get out? Just let him do his sermon.
I got you.
And it's just, sometimes it can get in the muck and the mire, and it can get dull. But if God's telling you to do it and telling you to say all this, say it. And I'm not saying that's what he's doing. I'm just saying churches expect 30 minutes. They expect we're leaving at noon. Some of them, we got to go eat.
There's no more Lubies, but there is tradition.
That's right. We got to go somewhere.
Yeah, I got you.
And so it's like some churches like that. But when you can let a pastor go 30, 35, when he doesn't have a time limit, he won't go super long. Yeah. Just let him finish. And I don't like the time limit thing. I've never have. I had a pastor one time tell me, if you preach at this church 30 minutes or they get upset.
Oh my goodness.
Like, well, they need to deal with it.
Oh my goodness. So I've been preaching, let me start meddling. Let's talk about the music, because this has been a huge thing in my lifetime. You grew up, there's a songbook, the Southern Baptist hymnal, and again, it's just because I grew up Baptist, the Methodists had the same thing. A lot of churches have their own bit of music, and it's changed. Mm-hmm. And now we have what some people disparagingly call 7-Eleven music. Yeah. And so it's really caused some consternation in some churches. What do you say about that?
Well, there was a period there for the last 10 years where we kind of thought the worship wars were over. We'd kind of gotten past
The
that.
worship wars?
Yeah, that's kind of what, at least that's what
they
we
call
called it in
it, yeah.
seminary.
Okay,
Pastors
okay,
call it
okay.
maybe.
The worship wars is the
between
two-
traditional
yeah.
and contemporary. But I think we're kind of entering into maybe a little bit of a newer phase of
Yeah,
that. It's
yeah.
probably not going to be quite as volatile as it was in the 90s, maybe the 80s.
It really did get kind of nasty.
But so, I think maybe we're getting a little bit more, some of the more modern worship is coming about that's even kind of taking contemporary to a new level that some people just aren't comfortable with. I really feel like, to me, the future of church worship, as worship from the standpoint of the music, is going to be even more blended than what we consider blended now. Taking all those things and
When you
molding
say
it
blended,
together.
please explain, because some folks don't know what you're talking
Okay, so
about.
like taking modern praise courses in 7-Eleven songs, some people call them, and old hymns, and mishing those together into one service would be blended.
Yeah.
And I really feel like the future of the church will be taking that and kind of blending it even more. So some churches, our church included, many other churches have a contemporary service and a traditional service or more traditional service. So this is my personal take. I feel like the future of that is going to be bringing those two things back together to form one corporate group.
Okay, I'm going to try not to offend anybody here.
Yeah.
I've always thought, I've never understood why we even had the wars to begin with, why we have a battle over it. Because to me, both sides of the music are great. I love the hymns, but I like the contemporary. And usually what you would get is you would get a church like I remember the church I went to years ago. They came out and said, "We are no longer doing hymns. We're doing this," and it ruffled
Really?
people wrong.
That
And it's
one?
like. And it's like, why? Why can't you do both? You have 4 or 5 songs set up. Do one song here, one song here. Do it traditionally like it says. Do it contemporary. Nobody's going to care if you just keep it all mixed. But what you do is a lot of people feel like they are pushed to the side. And, it's oh, well, we need you over here, or we need you over here. And so you want to bring the church together. You want old and young together. So it's okay to mix it. The contemporary is not the devil's music. It's not.
No, it's
and
no.
I know it's not. A lot of people look at it that way. They
Sure.
think the hymns, but the hymns are not old and dirty and dusty either. They're
Well, my mother
great.
always said this, and it's true, and I probably went through a really hard time in my life or whatever. Those old hymns preach a sermon. And I enjoyed the contemporary stuff, and I really enjoy that sort of thing or whatever. But I have found that the music at Green Acres really speaks to me now, and I go to the traditional. And maybe I've just gotten older. I don't know. But I know eventually by attrition, people of my generation are dying off. And so do you see the hymns dying off?
No,
I don't.
I don't. Like I'm 36. I love them. I lead music at that church. Not very well, but I lead music. And when
Man,
I'm
you do
singing
everything.
them, when I'm singing them, no, I don't. I don't do everything. I lead and I
Let's
preach.
not
That's
start
it.
that rumor.
I don't do everything. Trust me, I don't. But when we're singing them, sometimes you just want to stop and just repeat a verse because it's so powerful
Yes.
and what it is.
Yes.
But at the same time, praise and worship can be the same way. Where I have an issue with praise and worship is when, and I know of a church that did this once because somebody was telling me a story that they were in Sunday service, and no offense to the guy, but the guy was like singing a line from a song. And then he goes, okay, now sing it again. And then he goes, okay, everybody close your eyes. And then it's in the third time. Now everybody hold your hands up in the air and praise the Lord. They sang that song about 4 or 5 times in a row, and everybody's kind of like, we're done.
We're done.
When you push
They
it a
gave
little
up.
too far,
Yeah.
it's like trying to make something happen. Don't make something happen. I've been at a church where, the same church where they were singing a song years ago, and man, you could just feel the spirit. Even the pastor turned around and kind of looked like, what is going on?
Right.
And it was a Chris Tomlin song. I mean, it was just really powerful, and you could just feel it. And so contemporary's good, but you got to put it all in perspective. Don't knock one side for the other. I mean, the hymns weren't always old. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's right. I think a big deal is just quality. Whatever you do, you need to do it well. And people are more drawn, I think, to quality than necessarily a certain style.
Sure.
Right.
And I mean, in hymns, they can't go away. We can't let the hymns go away. You think about, I mean, if you watched, I'm sure you guys did, being in the media, what was going on when Notre Dame was burning.
That's my next, exactly.
The people were standing in the streets singing hymns. They were singing.
They
those
weren't singing
songs.
praise music, they were singing hymns.
Because that's the tradition that they know.
After 9/11, I know I was working at a Dallas television station, and we went to all these churches, and everybody was basically, it got real fast. And those big congregations, they brought up the hymn books,
Right.
and they were singing "A Mighty Fortress is Our God" and that sort of thing. And I think sometimes almost when we get knocked off our pins, and it's happened to me, you go back to the foundation, and the foundation are those hymns.
I think one of the big problems is when you say hymns, people automatically think old.
Yeah.
And so like scripture, they say, oh,
Dusty.
scripture is old, it's tired. Hymns aren't tired. If they feel tired of you, you're just either not singing them right or they're not doing it right, because hymns are amazing when you sing them, because it is like singing scripture sometimes.
It is.
And I mean, you're
Pardon me.
and you can praise and worship to a hymn just like you can to contemporary music. So I mean, they both have their place, and I think they should both be combined and not separated and not one or the other.
Yeah.
I think you should just mix it in, because one, like you said, for all of those that grew up with them, when people start dying off, as sad as that sounds, when they do, you want the younger generation to bring them up, and because you don't want to lose them, because they're too important.
Yeah.
So once again, coming full circle, this this deal with the Notre Dame Cathedral, even if you're not Catholic or whatever, it affects you, and you think it may lead to any sort of spiritual revival, perhaps, like 9/11 did here, although it didn't last that long?
I don't think it'll have quite as much of an impact as 9/11 did. Paris has lost an iconic place, iconic place of worship, but Notre Dame had become more of a relic and a tourist attraction than a worship center.
Yeah.
And so I think Paris is mourning the loss of a iconic piece of architecture, a part of their history, more than a part of their faith. And so
I'm right there with him. I'll be a little more blunt, maybe. I don't know if this is where he's going. When the world cries, and I mean the secular world, when the secular world cries over something that's religious, I don't think it has as much power in the religious community, if you will. What I'm getting at is the world loved Notre Dame. They love the look of it. They love the expensiveness of it. I mean, there's I think I heard the guy today say like $1 billion in artifacts, or a lot of money in artifacts was saved. It's like, why do you have that much money in a church? I mean, and I'm not even trying to knock on Catholics or anything. I'm just saying, in my opinion, it's a building. Yes, it's history. You don't want that to go away.
No.
But for the spiritual aspect, no, I don't think anything, because like we said earlier, the church is not the building. The church is the people.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's sad that it burned. I don't like seeing it burn, but at the same time, I'm not too worried about it. The loss I feel is there's 800 years of history there.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't see a spiritual sense in that church at all, and I just don't, because I'm with him.
My hope would be that as people look at that and they start Googling Notre Dame or Googling the artifacts, stuff like that. I believe one of the artifacts they had there was supposedly the crown of thorns, that Christ wore. That perhaps those that are in the Catholic Church or outside the Catholic Church would look at that thing and they would say, I want to know more.
Sure.
And so they begin investigating. Well, what does the crown of thorns mean? What does it represent? And dive in deeper. And it could be something that could awaken faith within them, whether they are within the Catholic Church or outside. So that would be my prayer in the midst of that.
No, I'm with him. Anything to get people talking about the church in a good light is good.
Sure.
As to your question, I don't see it causing a real ripple effect immediately in the church.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. James Newsom is going to be our second guest after we take a break, and we're going to talk more about building it back and just the historical aspect of the whole thing. So once again, Easter Sunday is coming up this Sunday. What are you going to be preaching on? Can I ask you?
No. I bet it has something to do with the cross.
I bet it does. What about you?
The
I guess
resurrection.
I know David does most of the preaching. but
Yeah,
you're gonna
Brother
be-
David will be preaching the sermon, talking about the cross, obviously, and the gospel message of Jesus Christ, and so that's what we'll be receiving down at the South Campus.
Can I add one more thing?
Please do, please.
Just remember, Sunday is about the resurrection. Christianity is about the resurrection. I know we say the cross, the death, the burial, the resurrection. So important. This is the biggest time for Christians.
And I still think it should be more of a thing.
It should be huge. It should be huge. And Lord willing, we can get it there. We don't want to commercialize it. We want it to be huge for what it is, and that's Jesus.
All right. My guest today has been Pastor Dustin Slayton from Green Acres Baptist Church South and the Reverend Chris Dudley from the Long Lake Baptist Church, right? In what city is that?
West of Palestine.
West of Palestine.
In
All right.
Tucker.
All right. Thank you guys for being with us. Thank you for hanging on. And James Newsom's coming right back with more religion and politics. Stay with us. All right, back to part 2 of our podcast now. Our old friend, Dr. James Newsom of UT Tyler, back with us. It's really good, Doctor, that you're here this week because we have a lot of history to talk about. First of all, this week, the Notre Dame Cathedral burns down. How did that affect you?
Oh, when somebody
All the history.
posted on Facebook, and it was just, I went on and watched, it was just heartbreaking, just because it is history. I'm not a Catholic, and it didn't have the theological impact, but that beautiful stained glass window, which I've heard has survived, and all of the artwork, that was my immediate concern.
And the organ, they
organ.
say worked.
Amazing that
Not
in
worked,
that
but it
kind
was
of a-
saved, I'm sorry.
That kind of a fire, that kind of intensity, that they were able to save those artifacts and save. I saw a picture of the crown of thorns the other day, and it's just like, oh, that is so beautiful.
I had no idea, and again, I can't know everything. I enjoy following the news or whatever, but over in France, there have been like a lot of attacks on French churches, Catholic churches, or whatever. And so I was off from work on Monday, so I'm watching not local, but a cable television, and somebody is calling in saying perhaps it could be, and both hosts, I guess they had their marching orders to shut that down right now. We're not going to talk about whatever, but you can't help but at least think about that. I hope it wasn't that. They say, first of all, it was an accident, but man, what are they doing with a church that's 800 years old if somebody's welding with a cigarette? I mean, what do you say about that?
Well, I mean, it's undergoing renovations, and it has a lead roof.
Yeah.
How else are you going to make those kind of repairs?
True.
I had the initial reaction as well. This looks
There you
like
go.
terrorism, and just
Hope it's not.
you hope it's not. But with the volume of attacks on Christian churches,
I thought it was a couple of attacks. Am I right or am I wrong? 875 attacks?
well, that's a
I've
much
heard.
higher number than I heard. But
Well,
I'd heard
I
20 within the last.
Well, see, I'd
month.
heard 10, and then I read this morning. There's so much information and misinformation out there on the interwebs, so let's not. I don't want to go there, but I mean, let's face it. Right now, Europe is having its problems, and we're not saying it is or it's not terrorism. We're not doing that here, but
Right.
I mean, I don't see how those anchor guys who shut off experts. I don't see how they shut them down completely. Maybe a sentence of "we don't know yet,"
Right.
and that's what we're saying right now on the podcast. We don't know yet. But first of all, when I saw that thing on fire on television, I thought, "Oh no!"
And it was so eerily beautiful. That spire on fire and the red glow, and it's like that is some of the most beautiful pictures coming out. But the absolute heartbreak of this old church,
Yeah.
the heart of Paris.
Well, I was even thinking myself, I'm not Catholic at all, and I thought, if they need some money to rebuild it or whatever, maybe I'll kick in a couple of shillings here or there or whatever. But then I wake up this morning and I realized they've already had like a billion with a B
billion.
dollars pledged. But last night, Davis Hansen makes a great point, and we both enjoy his writing and what he does or whatever. And this would concern me if I was going to give money, is that some of the more progressives in France or whatever are saying, let's build it back, but not like it was. Let's build it to today's norms, today's whatever, which would mean, what, a movie theater, a cafe, or whatever. I mean, there it is right there. There's the river, Seine River, right?
Right.
And I've never been there. My wife has. And I think that's one reason why I keep hearing they had such a hard time getting to it, is because it's cut off by water. But I want to know this, and there's nothing worse than an armchair quarterback, but I'll bet the Vatican has a fire department. Why in the world did they not have a better plan? Because maybe I'm wrong, but I'm hearing it took 2 hours for the fire department to get up and going.
And why wasn't there fireboats on the Seine? I mean, it's right there.
I don't know, but man, you can imagine how 800-year-old wood burned so quickly. I was told, or I read yesterday, they had to cut down 52 acres of trees for the wood inside. That's one reason why the inside they called it the forest.
And they said that the oaks that they use for the inside, that they still have plenty of those in Europe, that it can be rebuilt with, close to original wood.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm concerned like you with
If they build it back, how they're going to build it back? Because if I'm going to give money or whatever, it'll never be like it was. I mean, come on, let's be real. But if they're going to turn this thing into like a cafe, forget it.
right. I mean, you put a Starbucks right there.
Exactly. I hope not. I mean, we can't.
Nothing wrong with Starbucks, but it's the commercialization of everything.
So we continue to wait and watch to see what's going on there. What I keep hearing is better and better and better, that more things are saved than we once thought. So literally thank God for that.
The very fact it was under renovation, they had most of the stuff pulled out. So
This is one reason why you and I wanted to talk this week. And folks at home, if you love history like we love history, it's the anniversary once again. What year is this, the 70th? Or
77th.
The Doolittle Raid.
right.
And tell us why, Captain Jimmy Doolittle, we both love World War II history. I love it. I think America rose to, there they are right there. Why was this raid so important? It happened in 1942. Go ahead.
April of 1942. Think of what's happened. December of 41, just 5 months before Pearl Harbor. America's been attacked in the Philippines. It just seems like everywhere
It's going wrong.
We're on the defensive. We're failing to meet this juggernaut that is the Japanese Empire.
Or the Axis.
And
Yeah.
as well as North
Germans.
Africa and Germany controlling Europe.
Yeah.
And this raid conceived, and I was reading up again on it, and I've always had a fascination with this. I was, as a kid, bedridden for a while because of heart surgery, and my mom went to the library and checked out a lot of books, and one of the books she checked out was
I'm
Larson's
looking something up.
30 Seconds Over Tokyo, and it just captivated me as a kid what those guys went through.
Oh,
So at a time when the nation is just in sore need of heroes, here's Lieutenant Colonel Doolittle and his 16 planes that attack the heart of Japan.
well, if my history is right, let me know. You are the professor, and I'm not so great at my paper here. Here's one reason why I think this was such a monumental thing, is Japan had us in a headlock.
Yes.
And they were almost taunting us, saying, you can't hit us.
Right.
You cannot bomb us. We will make your life miserable. I know my mom and dad said, back then you would listen to the news commentators at night on the radio. There was no television back then. And I think the guy's name was Carlton-Born or whatever, but he'd come on, oh, I got some bad news tonight, folks. It was horrible. And my folks said everybody was really down. And so this entire thing, even though with Doolittle and the President Roosevelt at the time, they knew it wasn't going to be exactly what they wanted, but it was going to be sort of a knockout blow to Japan to let them know we could hit them. And so, again, am I wrong here? So they devised this plan, instead of little fighter planes off an aircraft carrier, small to medium bombers, right?
Medium bombers, B-25s.
And so they flew over Japan, dropped bombs, but they didn't have enough gas to get back, so they had to ditch those planes in China.
Right.
And Doolittle, he said he thought he was going to get court-martialed because he lost every plane. Every plane was demolished.
All 16 planes.
But it just showed Japan, we're on the come, buddy. We're coming back, right?
Not only did they have to fly, they could not have returned. You could not land those planes on an aircraft carrier. They're too big. And the flight across Japan, Doolittle thought he was toast as soon as he got back. 15 planes crash landed in China. 1 plane made it to Vladivostok, Russia, and made an emergency landing in Russia. The Russians, though, are at peace with Japan. They don't want war with Japan, so the crew was interned as prisoners of war. But to Stalin's credit, he had the crew transferred. He couldn't affect their release. He had the crew transferred to base near Iran and arranged for their escape. And they escaped across, that one crew escaped across the frontier into Iran and made their way to the U.S. Embassy and back to the United States.
So that's how they pulled that off.
At one. Now, 8 crewmen were captured in China after crash landing in China. Those 8 crewmen were taken back to Japan. 3 of them were executed for crimes against Japan. Because a lot of the gunners, as they were bombing, strafed civilians. So Japan executed 3, put the rest of the 5 crewmen on a starvation diet, and one of the crewmen died from malnutrition. The other 4 from that crew were able to survive and make it back after the war.
And this crew, just like all like bombing crews back then, a lot of these people were 19 and 20-year-old kids. When I was 19 years old, I couldn't even open up a can of peas hardly. I can just imagine flying a bomber
And being
or
responsible for that.
I just cannot imagine the responsibility. But these kids grew up fast. They grew up during the Depression. You're at UT Tyler. You teach history and you teach things like this. We both like Victor Davis Hanson. And let me talk to folks at home, and maybe you have some other additions that you can share with our audience. Hillsdale College is fantastic.
Absolutely.
And you and I talked about this. And they right now it's free. You can go to Hillsdale College, just Google it, go through all the links or whatever, and they have lectures on the history of World War II, taught by Victor Davis Hanson. And just in case you thought, well, history, sometimes it's hard for me. It's not a lot of dates. It's just a lot of stories. And it is amazing how we outproduced the Axis. And he talks about the planes that we were smart. We realized we need these bombers. No, we need more of this and this and this. Well, the Germans were so good with engineering, but they hung in there with their fighters and their bombers, and that's one reason why we could beat them.
Well, especially like tanks and things like that. The Germans were superior at designing and creating these beefy, tough tanks.
Yeah.
But okay, we can produce 10, 15, 20 to your one.
Yes.
And we'll just overwhelm you with volume. And so while our tanks weren't as good, we had a lot of them, enough to supply Britain, France, Soviet Union, China.
And I'd heard this time and time again by reading that most of our boys, and they were boys who were over there, were off the farm. And basically on the farm, if you grew up on a farm, you got to be able to fix stuff. You can't call the mechanic. And so when the Sherman tank would get bogged down or the engine would go out or there's a problem or whatever, we could fix our stuff. Most of the Germans grew up in an urban area, and once their tank died or whatever, they just got out and walked home or walked to wherever they were based or whatever. And so it was a fascinating time.
Well, and especially these monster German tanks, you have to take apart. Some of them you have to take off the turret and to get to just a transmission repair.
They over-engineered themselves is what they did, especially with the fighters. But I'm telling you, I'm recommending it to you. I don't know if you had a chance to take that. But folks at home, if you really enjoy World War II, or not who could enjoy war, but you're fascinated with the history, Hillsdale College, Victor Davis Hanson teaches it. It's very easy to listen to or whatever. You can take a test at the very end if you want to. You don't have to. But I'm telling you, if you enjoy just learning about things, I highly recommend the thing from Hillsdale College.
Well, and a lot of things in higher ed today, higher ed's under a lot of attack, which I know that's not the soup du jour, but the fact that they offer this course for free and they throw it out there for the public, all you have to do is that they're interested in educating, not raking in the big dollars.
I know, because the deal is, I saw a thing on there where if you're an educator, you can basically write in, they'll send you free pocket constitutions to hang out to your class. Right. I don't know what would happen if you handed out constitutions to kids, but I got one of their Hillsdale constitutions on my desk. I mean, you can't know enough about the Constitution. You can't. And I need to know more. And they have a class on that as well. It's all online, and it's just beautiful that it's free education. Of course, they're going to ask you for a little money, but it's not necessary.
Right.
I mean, just to cover the cost.
Well, and of course, teaching at UT Tyler, being a state institution, that tuition money keeps us going. But places like Hillsdale that can build up an endowment and get the large donors backing them, that you can do things like this. Okay. And the fact that they do and they don't try to, milk the public for every dime they have is...
Back to the Doolittle Raiders. So anyway, these guys were Captain Jimmy Doolittle and the man who's the man who just
Lieutenant
died?
Colonel.
Lieutenant. Who's the man that just
Richard
died?
Cole.
Tell us about him.
He was Doolittle's co-pilot.
Yeah.
And he was the last surviving member of the Doolittle Raiders.
Right there. He just died recently. 103.
These guys, the survivors, they knew they were a part of something special. So after the war, beginning in the 40s, they put together a traveling case, a big sea chest locker, and they had silver goblets engraved with the names of the crew members, and the name was engraved right side up and wrong side up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then as each crew member, so the crew members that had already died, like in prison or whatever, their goblet was turned upside down and put in the case. But you could still
right there.
You could still read the name, because on the other side it would be upside down. And then they would drink an honorary toast. They'd meet once a year. They had cognac that they carried in the traveling case, and they would have a toast to the fallen. It was a private ceremony. They did it behind closed doors.
Wasn't a big, like, look at us.
And they continued that until I think 2013 was the last time few survivors.
These guys saved the world. And this is, I mean, when you look at it once again, you get men and women, because my mother-in-law was one of the first waves there ever was in the U.S. Navy. And her situation was like most men, grew up in abject poverty. She grew up in Missouri. All my folks grew up in Texas. You didn't have anything. When my dad died, we found that he still saved string. So you live through the Depression, then you're drafted or called to go do this. You march your way across Italy and Germany and Europe and France and Japan, not Japan, but Japan properties. I mean, looking at death every day. And then you come back home and you build America. You rebuild it on the GI Bill. It's incredible what these people did.
They're not called the greatest generation for nothing.
They're not. And this man who just died, Cole, who was Doolittle's co-pilot, he said one time they were flying, I just read this as a blade, they were flying someplace or whatever. At the time, the Wabash Cannonball song was quite popular on the radio, so he was singing the Wabash Cannonball, and Doolittle shot him a look like, stop. Very serious man.
Right.
Very, very serious man. So he put it into that.
And, you remember him for his raid on Tokyo, but he went on to serve in North Africa and Europe, and he come in. And where Doolittle's raid didn't materially do much damage.
It was just psychological.
But it got into the head of the Japanese. And as Chiang Kai-shek, who was in China at the time, the warlord over China, said, the Japanese had to make some very bad decisions to protect the homeland. They had to pull troops out of China. They had to pull troops out of other places because the emperor had promised the homeland would stay unviolated.
Yeah. All right. Anything you have left on the Doolittle Raiders that you want to talk about?
No, we're good.
All right. So tomorrow's going to be a big day in politics. Again, as I mentioned in the very first part we signed on before you showed up, you're not supposed to talk about politics and religion. We're talking about everything today. So tomorrow's going to be a big day when it comes to politics, because tomorrow the entire 400-page Mueller report drops.
Minus redactions.
Color-coded for, I say this, both sides say, see, I told you so, and it starts up again. It starts up again. Someone's going to miss a period, not cross a T, something, and this shows whatever.
I like the fact they're color coding it, though, to show this part is redacted because it's grand jury testimony. This part's redacted because it's an ongoing operation. You at least know hopefully what's being covered.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny because you saw St. Robert Mueller for so long could do no wrong, pure. And then all of a sudden the report came out that they did the 4-page extraction. Here's what it was. Now all of a sudden he's the bad guy. And then you got William Barr, who was the toast of Washington, D.C., Mr. Down the Middle, was one of the Bush's attorney generals a couple of years ago. Now all of a sudden he's the big bad wolf, can't do anything right. Interesting. What do you
He's
say
evil
about that?
personified.
Evil.
Well, the very fact that they're putting this out and they're being dishonest, not Barr's people, but the talking heads on other media outlets are being dishonest when they talk about Barr redacting. He's working with the Mueller team to redact it. It's a joint operation. They're just.
My favorite phrase is he's Trump's handpicked man. Well, Eric Holder, the AG, was Obama's handpicked man. The president's cabinet is his handpicked.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. It's just the media has just.
Edmund Randolph was George Washington's handpicked man. So.
Oh man, I'm telling you. And once again, we talked about podcasts or other podcasts we loved or whatever. Newt Gingrich, doesn't matter how you feel about him as the politician or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you just like to hear, the man can teach some history.
Oh, he's good.
And the last time you were here, we talked about the history of George Washington. I'm telling you, he does a whole podcast about the history of Benjamin Franklin. What a fascinating character. Maybe one of these times we can delve into that. You talk about somebody, I mean, he makes George Washington look dull. I mean, by the time the guy was 18 years old, he was already rich. He had invented all these things. I mean, he dropped out of school because he didn't need it.
Right.
He ends up, helps found the University of Pennsylvania. But I'm telling you, it's called Newt's World, but it's about Benjamin Franklin. And I'm telling you, I listen to these things when I lie down to go to sleep, and I can't sleep because it's so good. But there's so much information out there. Do you have anything that you can share with us where people can get information about history? Yeah, because I know you love it.
Well, I mean, I'm still a traditionalist. I use books.
Books are great. Me too. And I like books. I bought a Kindle, and I just can't get it. But the problem is I have too many books in my house. You want some books?
Yes. I always need books. The answer to that is always yes. We need books. Yeah. You have to have the old-fashioned hold in your hand. It can't be outdated by your hardware or software kind of books.
And they smell good and they feel good. All right. James Newsom, thank you very much for being with us. We'll have you back. I'm sure we're going to have you on the air tomorrow to talk about the Mueller report. And so thank you very much for being with us. Today we talked about politics and religion. And remember, everyone has the right to my opinion, his opinion, the Reverend's opinion, and we like your opinion as well. Write us, call us, tell us what you like to hear. And thank you very much for watching our podcast.
What's you gonna get there? Some wonderful, you know, man, I'm kind of every other. That's some good,